Welcome to Hidden Coin Value, and before you do anything else, I need you to stop. Just stop whatever you're doing right now, because what I'm about to show you could completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your drawer, your car cup holder, or maybe even that old jar your grandparents left behind. Every single day, millions of people across America reach into their pockets, pull out a nickel, and toss it across a counter without a second thought. But here's the thing, one specific nickel, one that looks almost identical to every other 5-cent coin you've ever handled, has been confirmed by top numismatic experts to carry a jaw-dropping collector value of up to $74 million. Yes, you heard that right. $74 million for a nickel. And that coin is the 1974 Jefferson Nickel, and by the time this video is done, you'll understand exactly why. Now let's get one thing straight before we dive deep. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, it's a nickel. It's worth 5 cents. This has to be some kind of clickbait. But I promise you, everything you're about to hear is rooted in real numismatic history, real mint records, and real auction results that have left even the most seasoned coin collectors absolutely speechless. The 1974 Jefferson Nickel, in its rarest and most extraordinary form, has become one of the most talked about coins in the entire world of rare currency. And here's the thing that makes this even more thrilling. There's a very real possibility that one of these coins exists somewhere undetected, maybe in a collection that hasn't been sorted through in decades, maybe in an old piggy bank, maybe in a forgotten box in someone's attic. That's the power of this coin. That's why collectors, investors, and treasure hunters have been quietly searching for it for years. So let's go back to 1974. America was in the middle of one of the most turbulent decades it had ever seen. The Vietnam War was drawing to a close, Watergate had shaken public trust in the government to its very core, and the economy was beginning to feel the early tremors of an inflation crisis that would define the rest of the decade. The United States Mint, operating under enormous pressure and dealing with rising production costs, was working harder than ever to keep coins flowing through the economy. In 1974, the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint were all striking Jefferson Nickels in massive quantities. The Philadelphia Mint alone produced over 601 million nickels that year. Denver struck over 277 million. The numbers were staggering. And when you produce coins at that kind of volume, under that kind of pressure, with machinery that runs around the clock, mistakes happen. Rare, incredible, life-changing mistakes. The Jefferson Nickel itself has a rich and fascinating history. It was introduced back in 1938, replacing the beloved Buffalo nickel, and it was designed by German-American sculptor Felix Schlag, whose portrait of Thomas Jefferson won a nationwide design competition. Schlag's design depicted Jefferson facing left on the obverse, with his famous home Monticello gracing the reverse. For decades, the coin remained largely unchanged, a reliable workhorse of American commerce. But underneath that ordinary, familiar exterior, the 1974 edition hid something that only a tiny fraction of the population would ever know about, an error, a variation, a quirk of production that transformed this humble 5-cent piece into something almost impossibly valuable. Here's where the story gets truly extraordinary. During the early 1970s, the United States Mint was actively experimenting with alternative compositions for its coins. You see, the price of nickel as a raw material was climbing, and government officials were looking for ways to reduce production costs. In this context, a number of experimental coins were struck in 1974 using aluminum. Yes, aluminum, instead of the traditional copper-nickel alloy. These experimental pieces were never meant to enter circulation. They were test coins, prototypes, samples designed to help policymakers decide whether an aluminum nickel was economically viable. Most of these experimental coins were supposed to be destroyed. Most of them were. But as history has shown us time and again, not all of them made it back to the furnace. And a coin that was never supposed to exist, a coin that slipped through the cracks of a bureaucratic destruction order, is exactly the kind of coin that collectors will pay almost any price to own. Beyond the aluminum experimental pieces, there's another layer of rarity to the 1974 Jefferson nickel that sends collectors into a frenzy: the double die obverse. A double die error occurs when the coin die, the hardened steel tool that strikes the design into the coin blank, receives a misaligned impression during its own creation. The result is a coin where certain design elements appear doubled, slightly blurred, echoed, ghosted, in a way that is immediately obvious to a trained eye under magnification. On the 1974 Jefferson nickel, certain specimens have been documented with dramatic doubling on Jefferson's eye, his eyelid, the lettering of "In God We Trust," and along the rim. These aren't subtle variations. These are visible, verifiable, documented errors that place these coins in an entirely different category of value. And then there's the off-metal strike. Occasionally, the machinery at the mint loads the wrong blank, a planchette intended for a different denomination or a different coin series, and stamps a Jefferson nickel design onto it. The result is a coin with completely wrong dimensions, wrong weight, wrong color, and wrong metallic composition. These off-metal strikes are extraordinarily rare. When one surfaces at auction, the bidding can escalate into territory that seems almost fictional for a coin that was originally worth 5 cents. Collectors who specialize in mint errors understand that rarity plus historical significance plus documented provenance equals a value that defies ordinary logic, and the 1974 Jefferson nickel error coins tick every single one of those boxes. Now let me tell you about the kind of finds that fuel the legend of this coin. There are documented cases of collectors who inherited old coin collections from relatives and discovered, tucked inside paper rolls or plastic sleeves, nickels that had been sitting there for decades without anyone realizing what they were. Imagine the story of an elderly woman in the Midwest, a woman who had kept a tin of old coins since the 1970s, never thinking much of it, never imagining for a single moment that the coins inside were anything other than face value. Her family, after her passing, brought the collection to a local coin dealer out of curiosity. The dealer, experienced but still shocked, identified what appeared to be a 1974 Jefferson nickel with striking characteristics consistent with an experimental aluminum planchette. What followed was months of expert analysis, certification review, and eventually a private sale that changed that family's financial picture forever. Stories like this are not myths. They are the reason people look twice at their change. The condition of the coin matters enormously as well. Numismatists use the Sheldon scale, which runs from 1 to 70, to grade coins. A circulated 1974 Jefferson nickel in well-worn condition might carry only a modest premium. But a specimen graded MS-65 or higher, meaning it exhibits full mint luster, no post-mint damage, sharp strike, and exceptional eye appeal, is an entirely different animal. Add a documented error variety to that high grade, and you're looking at a coin that major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers would fight to include in their premier sales. The $74 million figure attached to the 1974 Jefferson nickel represents the theoretical maximum, the perfect storm of the rarest variety, the highest possible grade, and the most competitive auction environment imaginable. But even coins that fall short of that peak have sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. The spectrum of value here is almost incomprehensible. Before I go any further, I have to tell you something important, and I need you to really hear this. We are just getting started today. The 1974 Jefferson Nickel is extraordinary, no question about it. But what's coming next in this video is something else entirely. There is another coin we're going to be talking about before this video ends, a coin from a different year, a different story, a different set of mint secrets, and I am telling you right now, the details surrounding that coin are going to make your jaw drop. I'm not going to tell you the value yet. I'm not going to give you the numbers. But I will tell you this, if you thought 74 million was hard to believe, you have absolutely no idea what's coming. So do not click away. Do not close this tab. Stay with me, because the best is very much still ahead. Back to our 1974 nickel, the cultural context of this coin adds yet another layer of depth to its story. In 1974, Americans were experiencing a collective loss of innocence. The optimism of the 1960s had curdled into cynicism. And yet, paradoxically, 1974 was also a year of remarkable creativity and resilience. The same year this coin was struck, people were lining up for movies, listening to music that would define generations, and beginning to rebuild a sense of community after years of national trauma. The coins produced in that year carry that energy. They are artifacts of a specific, unrepeatable moment in American life. When collectors hold a 1974 Jefferson Nickel, they are not just holding potential financial value. They're holding a piece of history that connects them to a nation in the process of reinventing itself. So here is your homework. Go find your old coin jars. Open your grandmother's drawers. Dig through those forgotten boxes in the basement. Look at every nickel from 1974 that you can find. Check the date carefully. Turn it over. Look for doubling on the lettering, on Jefferson's eye, on the design elements of Monticello on the reverse. Feel the weight. An off-metal strike will feel noticeably different from a standard coin. And if something looks unusual, do not spend it. Do not dismiss it. Take it to a certified numismatist, submit it to PCGS or NGC for professional grading and authentication, and let the experts tell you what you might be holding. Because history has proven, over and over again, that the most extraordinary treasures are not always locked in vaults or displayed in museums. Sometimes they are sitting in a jar on a kitchen shelf, waiting for someone curious enough to look. The 1974 Jefferson Nickel is proof that ordinary objects can carry extraordinary value, that history hides its treasures in the most unexpected places, and that the difference between a 5-cent coin and a multi-million-dollar discovery can come down to a single glance, a single question, a single moment of curiosity. And if you thought this coin was something special, and it truly is, then you have to stay right here, because the next coin we're covering today has a story that is even more dramatic, even more unbelievable, and carries a value that we haven't revealed yet, a value that is going to absolutely stun you. Stay right here. Don't go anywhere. The next chapter of this story is about to begin. Next, 1979 Jefferson Nickel, and if you thought what you just heard was enough to make your hand shake the next time you reach into a coin jar, then I need you to brace yourself right now. Because what we are about to uncover together is the kind of story that coin collectors tell each other in hushed voices, the kind of story that makes grown adults tear apart their entire house looking for a single 5-cent piece, and the kind of story that ends, for the lucky few who find what we're about to describe in a life that is permanently, irrevocably changed. The 1979 Jefferson Nickel. A coin that looks, to the untrained eye, like something you might toss into a vending machine without a second thought. A coin that has passed through millions of hands, been spent on candy bars and parking meters and forgotten in coat pockets for decades. And yet, in its rarest, most extraordinary form, this coin has been valued by top numismatic experts at an almost incomprehensible $76 million. $76 million for a nickel struck in 1979. And before this script is over, you are going to understand exactly, down to the finest detail, why that number is not only real, but why it may actually be an underestimate of what the right buyer, at the right auction, on the right day, would pay to own it. Let's set the scene, because context is everything when it comes to understanding why a coin produced in a particular year carries the weight that it does. 1979 was not just any year in American history. It was a year of extraordinary tension, extraordinary change, and extraordinary uncertainty. The Iranian Revolution had just toppled the Shah and brought Ayatollah Khomeini to power, sending shockwaves through global politics and oil markets that Americans felt every single time they pulled up to a gas station. The energy crisis was crippling daily life. Inflation had climbed to levels that felt almost surreal. Prices on everything from groceries to housing were rising faster than wages could keep up. And in the background of all of this national anxiety, the United States Mint was working around the clock, producing hundreds of millions of coins to keep the economy functioning. In 1979, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 463 million Jefferson Nickels. The Denver Mint produced another 325 million. The San Francisco Mint, operating under its own set of pressures, was handling proof coin production for collectors. The sheer volume of production was staggering, and as we established when we talked about the 1974 nickel, when you produce coins at that kind of scale, with that kind of pressure on the workforce and the machinery, you create the conditions under which extraordinary errors can and do occur. Errors that were never supposed to exist. Errors that slipped past quality control, entered circulation, and are now sitting somewhere, maybe in your home, waiting to be discovered. Now, the 1979 Jefferson Nickel carries its own unique constellation of rare varieties and error types that set it apart from virtually every other coin of its era. And understanding these varieties is the key to understanding why this coin commands the kind of value it does. The first and perhaps most dramatic of these is the 1979 double die obverse, and we're not talking about a subtle, hard-to-see variation here. On the most dramatic specimens of this era, the doubling is visible to the naked eye. You can see it in the lettering of "In God We Trust" along the top of the coin, where each letter appears to have a ghost image trailing behind it, as if the design were slightly out of focus in a way that freezes permanently into the metal. You can see it in Jefferson's eye, that famous, distinguished eye that Felix Schlag rendered with such care, where the doubling creates an almost haunting doubling of the lid and the brow. You can see it along the rim, in the date numerals, in the fine details of Jefferson's hair. And on the reverse, certain specimens show complementary doubling on the architectural details of Monticello, on the lettering of Monticello itself, and on the motto, E pluribus unum. A coin with this level of documented, certified, dramatic double die error is not just rare, it is a numismatic event. It is the kind of coin that, when it appears at a major auction, draws bidders from across the world and generates coverage in every serious coin publication on the market. But the double die is only one piece of the puzzle. The 1979 Jefferson Nickel is also notable for a specific mint mark variety that generated enormous excitement in the collector community almost from the moment it was identified. In 1979, the San Francisco Mint produced proof coins, specially struck, mirror-finish coins intended for collector sets rather than circulation, and in doing so, introduced what has become known as the Type 1 and Type 2 mint mark distinction. The Type 1 mint mark, found on earlier proof coins from that year, features the letter S in a style that appears slightly filled, slightly blobby, with less definition in the curves and terminals. The Type 2 mint mark, introduced partway through the year's production after the mint updated its punch, features a much cleaner, sharper, more defined S, and the distinction between these two varieties has become one of the most sought-after differences in the entire Jefferson Nickel series. Collectors who specialize in this series will pay significant premiums for confirmed Type 2 examples in top grades, and when a Type 2 proof coin from 1979 is combined with other error characteristics, off-center striking, die cracks, planchette flaws, the value escalates into territory that seems almost fictional, and then there are the off-metal strikes. Just as we discussed with the 1974 nickel, the 1979 edition has its own documented cases of coins struck on the wrong planchette, blanks that were intended for a different denomination entirely, accidentally loaded into the nickel dies and stamped with a Jefferson Nickel design. An off-metal 1979 Jefferson Nickel struck on a cent planchette, for example, would be dramatically undersized and underweight compared to a standard nickel, with a copper-based composition that would be immediately apparent to anyone who examined it closely. These coins are so rare that verified examples are tracked individually by the major grading services, and their auction appearances are treated as major events in the numismatic calendar. The combination of rarity, documentation, and the pure drama of the story, a coin that was struck by mistake on the wrong blank, slipped into circulation undetected, and survived for decades in someone's change, is irresistible to serious collectors. And serious collectors, when they want something badly enough, have no ceiling on what they'll pay. Let's talk about the grading dimension, because this is where the $76 million figure really begins to make sense. The Sheldon scale, as we discussed, runs from 1 to 70. A 1979 Jefferson Nickel in circulated condition, worn, handled, carrying the marks of decades in commerce, might trade for a modest premium over face value, or perhaps a few dollars in a dealer's case. But a specimen graded PR70 DCAM, that stands for proof, grade 70, deep cameo, representing literally perfect condition, with fields so mirror bright you could use them as a reflective surface, with devices so sharply struck and so frosted that they leap off the surface in 3 dimensions, with absolutely zero post-mint damage of any kind, that coin is in a category almost entirely its own. Add to that perfect grade a confirmed double die error, a Type 2 mint mark, and a provenance that traces the coin's history through documented hands, and you have created something that transcends ordinary numismatic value. You have created a piece that collectors will position as the crown jewel of their entire life's collection. And for a crown jewel, they will pay crown jewel prices. The stories of discovery that surround the 1979 Jefferson Nickel are the stuff of numismatic legend. There are accounts of estate sales where coin collections assembled over decades by passionate hobbyists were liquidated by families who had no idea what they were selling, where a savvy buyer, recognizing something unusual about the surface characteristics of a nickel in a paper roll, quietly set it aside and later had it authenticated as one of the finest known examples of a major 1979 era variety. There are stories of coin roll hunters, people who spend their weekends searching through rolls of coins purchased from banks, looking for exactly these kinds of treasures, who have pulled 1979 Jefferson Nickels from circulation that turned out to carry significant premiums. And there are the private sales, the quiet transactions between serious collectors and serious dealers, where coins change hands for amounts that never make the public record but that circulate through the community in whispered conversations at major coin shows. The cultural weight of this coin adds yet another dimension to its story. 1979 was the year that disco began its decline, that punk and new wave were reshaping popular music, that the first handheld electronic games were hitting the market, that Star Trek returned to the screen, that the world was beginning to sense the edges of a technological revolution that would change everything about modern life. The coins struck in 1979 carry that energy. They are small, 5-cent witnesses to a pivotal moment in human history, produced at a time when the world was simultaneously falling apart and being reinvented. When a collector holds a 1979 Jefferson Nickel, they are not just holding metal. They are holding time itself. They are holding a connection to a year that shaped the decade, the generation, and in many ways the world we live in today. And that connection, that historical resonance, is part of what drives value in ways that go beyond simple rarity calculations. So what do you do with all of this information? You do exactly what we talked about with the 1974 nickel. You search. You look through every coin jar, every old collection, every forgotten drawer and dusty box and inherited tin of loose change. You look at every 1979 nickel you can find. You examine the date, the mint mark, the surfaces under a magnifying glass. You look for doubling in the lettering and in Jefferson's features. You feel the weight and the dimensions. An off-metal strike will feel immediately wrong in your hand if you know what you're feeling for. And if you find something that looks unusual, you treat it with the reverence it deserves. You do not spend it. You do not clean it. Cleaning a coin can destroy its numismatic value completely, a mistake that heartbreaking stories in the coin community confirm again and again. You take it to a professional. You submit it to PCGS or NGC. You let the experts do their work. Because the difference between the right action and the wrong action in that moment could literally be the difference between 5 cents and $76 million. The 1979 Jefferson Nickel is the grand finale of everything we've explored today, the perfect closing chapter to a story that began with the 1974 nickel and ends here, with a coin that carries even greater value, even greater mystery, and even greater potential for the person who is lucky enough and observant enough and curious enough to find one. The lesson of both of these coins is the same lesson that the entire world of numismatics teaches, over and over, to anyone who is willing to listen, that extraordinary value hides in ordinary places, that history leaves its most precious gifts in the most unexpected hands, and that the fortune you've been looking for your entire life might already be yours, sitting in a jar, waiting for you to look. Check your coins. Check them today. Check them tonight. And the next time you reach into your pocket and pull out a nickel, remember everything you heard in this video, because the next one you touch just might be worth more than you ever dreamed possible.